Hello, everybody. Hello, my friends. Welcome, everybody, to Master Negotiators Live. It's your essential weekly guide to negotiation, the art and the science of negotiation. I'm Jean-Nicolas Reyt, or you can call me JN. I am an associate professor of management at McGill University, where my specialty is negotiation and conflict management. So, what can you expect from Master Negotiators Live? Every week, I bring one or two negotiation experts as my guest, and they not only have a wealth of experience in negotiation, but also fascinating stories to share. This live stream is really a melting pot where I invite guests from sales, procurement, management, mediation, arbitration, and even law enforcement. My mission is to arm you with practical insights that you can use in your daily life or in your work to improve your negotiation skills. If you have not done so already, please join my newsletter on my website, jnreyt.com. I'm going to add it as a QR code up on the left corner, and you can join. And this is how you can know who my future guests are going to be, and you can also have access to the resources that I'm sharing with my followers. So let's get this show started. The first guest that I'm going to be introducing, and we'll see if we can introduce our second guest, but he's having issues with his microphone. But the first guest that I have is Steve Alban Tineo. So Steve is a renowned business accelerator. He's working globally. He's a master in business development, negotiation, and more. Steve runs a BART business exchange, connecting people with exciting opportunities, and his network is really vast, involving diplomats, businesses, high-stake negotiators worldwide. So let me add Steve to the show. Hello,
Thank
Steve.
you. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Jean. Thank you so much
How are you
to invite
doing?
me here. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I'm in Switzerland. It's the early evening. I have candles, flowers. I have my little dog who just went to the vet. So it's a beautiful, beautiful moment.
You told me your dog has a hurt paw, right?
Yeah, he's 16 years old, and sadly, the elevator door smashed, and he
Oh,
was
wow.
just, a little late. So I tried to, so he broke one of his finger. And
Right.
because he's 16, he's just, you might hear him barking in the back, but he's a sweet one.
So I think I beat you because my dog is 18 years
Oh,
old.
congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful.
I kept her alive for 18 years, which is a really great achievement. So,
Brilliant. Good care.
yeah, to get you started, can you share with us your number one negotiation tip?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a very simple word. It's authenticity, but it's very badly used, especially when it comes to negotiation. Authenticity, it's not only being yourself fully, it's actually receiving the other one fully. You mentioned that one of your passion, Jean, is conflict resolution, and I've done quite a bit of conflict resolution. And actually, someone angry, or when I'm angry, I'm simply communicating with the other side. And that type of authenticity of receiving, looking at the world with the pure filter of what is, and not the interpretation of my own mind, or not listening to the other to answer, but really listening it. So that empathetic listening, and then accepting my own mistakes, trying to be humble as much as I can, or a student of life. That makes us not only better negotiators but better human beings. So that would be the most inspiring or successful people I've seen in this field, maybe more conflict resolution than negotiation, were very authentic people.
That's extremely interesting because I think for a lot of people, negotiation is kind of like a bluffing game, and so it's really
Yes.
where you're not supposed to be authentic, but you're making the case that you're supposed to be authentic. So I see Patrick is waving. We'll see if his audio works. So let me just introduce Patrick before I let him on the show. Patrick is our second guest for this week. He's the founder of Centroid Training and Marketing. He has 30 years of experience in sales, and he's also the author of three books, and you can buy them on Amazon for Patrick Tinney. Patrick is a go-to expert in sales and negotiation. He's frequently featured in business journals. So let's let Patrick into the show. Hey, Patrick. No, we can't hear you.
Oh no, Patrick.
We still have the same issue. Okay, Patrick, we'll see. We'll let you try to fix it. Maybe try to get out and come back in, and we'll try to see if it works. But
Ah,
we'll let you go. And if it doesn't work, I'll have you on another stream. Okay. So let's see. But as I was telling you, maybe try to join with your phone. We'll see if that works. Okay. So Steve, let's start together, and it's okay. We'll ask Patrick in the future if to come to another show. So first of all, just I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about negotiation. If you are part of the stream and you're seeing something that you find interesting, whether you're on LinkedIn or you're on Facebook or on YouTube, please post in the chat, or if you're on LinkedIn, post a comment. A question for our guest, Steve, and I will weave it in our discussion. So let's start, Steve. First of all, what's a business accelerator?
uh, the BART structure, it's funny because it's a little bit different. What we've realized, for example, in engineering schools, is that people have a lot of talents. So an engineer, a scientist, will have a lot of talents in creating or inventing something. But most of these people, or most of the time, when they create companies, and I'll give a number that we have in Switzerland, 85% of the failures in startups in engineering school, it's due to a conflict between the funders or the founding shareholders.
Yeah.
So I actually went to them and I said, look, I am good in a few things and I'm very bad at other things. But what you're good at, I cannot really understand: biology, engineering, this computer science. But I'm normally kind of skilled now in dealing with human capital, so the people. So human capital plus finance. So I actually convinced them to trust me enough to open the door. And I am now investing and co-investing with people in startups or early ventures where there's absolutely brilliant talents, but they're not really skilled at doing the commercial aspects or raising funds or doing negotiation or doing conflict management or handling whatever it is, diplomatic contracts or with contracts with governments or multi-level contracts or whatever. So I help them structure the company from the beginning. I choose the people and I create teams. Then I help them raise the money. Sometimes I actually even raise the money within my own financial circle. And then I really sit in either in the board of directors or in some kind of an executive committee role in the company. And I really make sure that all of the angles that they're not really good at are covered. And then I hire other people and I make sure that the company is done, is built properly. And then I'm kind of the conductor of the process. And it's fantastic because we see that, the few success we had from going from startups to existing revenue generating companies, the percentage we have is close to 100%. It doesn't mean that we always win. It means that we always have a success, at least by bringing the people to where they go. No crash because of conflict in the and this management or in this and this founders. So that's what I do. And then sometimes I'm inside, sometimes I'm outside. So I work a lot as we have a company called Assertive, and I work in both commercial and diplomatic and humanitarian negotiation. And in commercial, I work with a few groups or a few institutions, and they can call us, and we would accompany the team a little bit for training, but I'm not huge in training. I delegate that to others, but more to really understand where is the company at and where they want to go. And then I prepare or I train a few people or I do the negotiation with them. So it's quite fascinating because I'm very hands-on. All my life I've been a responders, so I have close to 800 missions on the field and all kind of negotiation missions or endeavors. So it gives me a really kind of a vast array of experience and a little bit of humility because I've seen enough of the mistakes, my mistakes, and of others to really see that it's not because negotiation that you will negotiate well the next thing.
Right.
Everything is very complex.
So interesting points. What do you think, from your experience, are the main sources of conflicts between, early entrepreneurs when they're starting a job, like a company together?
Right. Oh, I love that question. So first thing is a conflict is always or almost always emotional. If it's not emotional, then it's not a conflict. It's a disagreement, and kind of a rational solution can be found, maybe with a third party, with a lawyer, or with a facilitator, mediator. But when you start becoming emotional, it's something inside of you has been touched. So that's what we call in negotiation normally the interests or the emotional stakes. What is the message behind the message? And that's very important because we understand that we're always blaming the others, or we're always trying, to find the responsibility outside of ourselves. And we've realized in conflict management that when you just play the role of a mirror and you bring people back to themselves, and you make them see their own behaviors, their own toxicity, or just their own anger, for example. So my wife, Sonia, she did something quite remarkable during mediation. She asks people if she can record them, and then she plays the recording. And most of the people would say, no, no, it's not me. You manipulated the tape. And we say, no, this is your voice. This is your tone of voice. This is your face. This is the words you use when you talk to your wife when you're angry. And people would be, it's impossible. I don't recognize myself. And this is exactly the point. When we are touched, that when we are emotional, the reptilian and limbic brain are kind of protecting ourselves. The prefrontal cortex is going down. So the more emotional, the less rational you are. And suddenly you completely lose your mind, or your right mind, and you go into that emotional protection state. And that's when we change the body posture, that's when our face is changing, the tone of voice is changing, and then we become super susceptible, and then everything's emotional. We feel that we're attacked in the core of who we are, because I tell you, I don't know that, I don't like long hair, and then you suddenly attacked, and it's like, why are you insulting me? And you take all of this emotional, you take it personal, when it's actually not personal. What I say about you, Jean, is saying more about me than about you.
Yeah.
If I criticize you in something, it's because I don't do the things you do. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It means that I see the world differently. But the problem is we take all of this information so emotional that suddenly I do better than you, and I know more than you. And then, I work more. I'm very organized in my work. So, I never have things on my desk. And, people actually, when I do a negotiation mandate, they believe that it's easy because I never show, I'm never stressed. I'm never running, and I'm never late, and I'm never, oh my God, it's so complicated. We tend to want to reassure the people. And some people are the exact opposite. So how do we communicate? And we see that most of these people, they just haven't learned how to communicate. First, because they're very rational and very academic. They wouldn't be very creative. They wouldn't be very social, and they wouldn't be very empathetic because it's not the kind of brain they have. So we have to teach them. And when we teach them how to let's say, welcome conflict in their life as a wonderful way of communicating and not taking it personally, and that out of conflict there's a lot of creativity, then suddenly they're less afraid. And then they take things less personally because they're aware or conscious of their own behaviors. And that makes a radical difference in everything we do.
Excellent. And so I think it's a good segue to a question that was asked by our friend Mike Inman from LinkedIn. He says, authenticity, I love it. How does learned empathy play into authenticity? Is it really authentic? Right? So great question.
I love Mike. Hi, Mike. I love what you do. Let's say that's a wide question.
Right.
Where do I start? Let's start with your own personal authenticity. You never know if the other one is manipulating or anything. But the first empathy, empathos, means suffering within the other one. It's not sympathy, which is suffering with the other one. So I recognize your suffering, I validate it, but I don't suffer with you. That's the number one. I refuse to take the suffering of the others, even if I can share it and I can be very understanding. So that's the number one. I protect myself because I don't want that empathy to be actually a weakness. It has to be a strength to recognize the other one, or to welcome the other one, to receive their pain, and then later, or if you can help them maybe express some emotions attached to it, and then later plant new rational thoughts. So that's the number one. And the second thing is, when you're authentic or not. When people are touching you. When you're protected. When you're annoyed. When you don't like the others. So the thing is, I'm not lecturing anybody. I try to be as authentic as I can. And sometimes you sit down in front of people and you don't like them. You don't feel comfortable. And they might be very great people. So I'm less authentic. The only thing is, we know when we're manipulating. We know when we're at the limit of lying. We know when we're trying to take power on someone, or that we're moody and we just want to give them a hard time. So the consciousness of that's what I call authenticity. It's actually to say, hey, today is not a good day. I cannot talk about it. Can we talk about it tomorrow? Because you're moody, because that, you don't have the patience for something. That may be what authenticity is. Now, I've seen that by sitting in front of very manipulative people, or people that really wanted to win the negotiation, and by me staying very kind, but very assertive. That's the reason why our company is called Assertive. It's actually, you can change the process, because when they attack me, I don't actually jump into the fight. If you tell me, oh, Steve, I really don't like your glasses and you really look bad, I would smile at you and I say, oh, Jean, it's sad that you actually think that, because I think you look absolutely gorgeous and I really like your hair and I love your style, the way you're dressed and everything, it's cool. And, if you don't go there and you don't enter the fight, and you just try to be enough confident about yourself to say, look, I'm not going to let them influence my thinking, then it's a part of authenticity, saying I can be myself and I can say, hey, look, maybe what you're saying, it's hurting me. But I don't say, Jean, you hurt me. I say, what you say is hurting me. Can we just maybe address things differently? And so you have the right to say yes and no. And I remember I ran that program for the World Economic Forum. It was called Saying Something Negative in a Positive Way. Because there's always a way of bringing things positive and not hurting the others. When you hurt, it's because maybe you want to win, or you're in a bad day and you don't see it. And authenticity is difficult, but I try to call myself an ethical negotiator, which I am most of the time. But I feel that sometimes, you just feel like saying, come on, these guys are not worth all of my effort. Let's move on. And and it's not true. At that very moment, that's when you say, no. Everybody is worth the effort of going into something. The world needs a lot of peacemakers. And it doesn't mean that by being a peacemaker or being a great ethical negotiator that you're not abundant. That you're not for capitalism or making money or whatever. It's just that there's always the balance in what you get and how you get it. And I really like, I'll give you a number of a study from Harvard, but the how you get it, for me, it's almost as important as what you get.
Right. Do you have an example of that?
Oh yeah, plenty. But I just want to then give you that number.
Right.
Harvard, Carnegie, and Stanford came out with a joint study. So they defined success, by career, money, wealth, family, kids, pretty much your self-satisfaction, and then happiness at the end.
Right.
And it was 15% aptitude, so what you know, and 85% the attitude, how you use what you know. And so the example is, and Jean, I'm pretty sure you have a ton of it. Oh, and I know Mike would have plenty. I have tons of negotiators in finance in Switzerland going out of a negotiation, they won. And they feel, sorry, excuse my French, they feel shit.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it was not a good negotiation. It's because the interest, maybe the emotional stake, or something was done in a way that it was not proper. And we have that all the time. So you go out and you're like, I was not good. Maybe the guy was a manipulator, or maybe I given. And for me, what's really important is, how do you feel at every moment? I have wealthy families. I work with a few family offices that I convinced the patriarch to actually take a quite substantial loss, not because of the rational aspect, but because of the emotional aspect, because it's touching him so much, because one of his child is involved and losing a lot of energy, because, it's going to be a 5 years legal thing, and, we cannot really do and they're like, okay, you're right, let's give up, it's $14 million, let's move to something else. And that's very important, because how you feel, it's actually the key of your performance. When you feel bad, you go into a negotiation, it's going to be very difficult to change it. So there's plenty of these examples that you see around you. And sometimes I would rather maybe apologize to someone and just say, look, I'm sorry, I behaved, the introduction was a little rude, or maybe, the form of what I said was not pleasant. I feel better than if I feel I've almost insulted someone and minimized his role, or making it clear that he was not prepared. I feel better, even if it's to put him up, and then, I might lose a hand to play, but at least I play something that is very aligned with my value and principles.
That's extremely interesting. And my follow-up question would be, you were saying, and I really agree with that 80%, of your success in life, or 85%, is your attitude. And so it seems to speak about, kind of like the emotional intelligence that people have.
Yes.
It's extremely important, and people kind of like negotiation. People vastly agree negotiation is an important skill, yet they avoid it. They don't want to
Yes.
do it. Why is that?
First, just to correct what you said, I don't think that it's 85%. It's Harvard, Carnegie, and Stanford
Right.
that came out with a study.
Yeah.
I believe it's irrelevant, but you're absolutely right. Emotional intelligence, it's something very strange. And there's maybe two answers to your question. The first one is, and I know in the States, it's even worse than what we have in Europe. There's a lot of very skilled negotiators that are sharks. They're the killer negotiators.
Yeah.
They're really good, but they're really good in a way that they're actually hurting the other ones. So when we introduce ourselves as negotiators, most of the time, or maybe 50% of the time, people would throw a joke. Oh, so you manipulate. Oh, so you're master at this. So and they really think that we are actually the bad guys. So that might be the number one. The second thing is that there's negotiation. We have to realize something very important. You might be negotiating something, but you're negotiating with someone. And that is where most of the people feel very vulnerable, because we have to open up. We have to give in. We have to make concessions or choices. And they are very personal things. You cannot only do the rational. If I come to you like this, or if I back up like that, it's, plenty of things. Synergology, or how much the body is speaking, it's 93% of everything we give. It's actually paraverbal and nonverbal. So the verbal is only a little part. So if you're not prepared, it pretty much like in conflict management, people are so afraid of conflict because they just don't know how to handle it. Right. If we teach people how to handle conflict, and it's actually positive, finally they really like it. I have a business partner in one of the company that I have, and he's the CEO of a very big company. We agree to disagree on everything. We even agree that when we agreed that when he's angry, he can hang up the phone on me. And then we give 5 minutes, we text each other, we apologize, because we're so different in what we do that sometimes we both get really emotional, but we agreed on it. And we know that we respect each other. And we know that, we have to separate the content and how we say things. The how we say it's more important than what we say. But we understand that both, we're very passionate in what we do, but we have set up rules. And that is very important. In negotiation, most of the people that are non-prepared, Jean, and you know that because you teach that in university and you see that the level, most of the people, especially the people with money, they believe that it's a soft skill and that they are good negotiators just because they're rich. I made a few deals and I bargain well, and they believe this is negotiation. When negotiation is a strong skill, there's a lot of emotional intelligence and a lot of angles to it. And if you're not prepared and you sit in front of someone, then your ego might want to take power and domination over the person and win. And if you want to win a negotiation, oh my God, you're already You already started in a very, very wrong foot. Yes, you want to win, but what do you want to win? What's the shared common objective? How are you prepared? What are the other person objectives? Is it really aligned? Is it not? Are you winning and you make someone in the street or not? And they're very, very important things. So you go with something very emotional by relying on that rational aspect, the aptitude, and you have to use your attitude in front of someone, but you're not prepared. You're not prepared in what you negotiate, but not how you negotiate it. And that makes a huge difference with the training of the people we work with, people that are actually prepared, that understand the attitude part. My God, they almost unbreakable because they're there, they're fully there, confident, they're themselves, and they're like, I understand that the other one is the other one. You might attack me, you might play, you might manipulate. I am not. I cannot be broken by the other side. And it completely changed the dynamic.
It's extremely interesting what you're saying. It reminds me a little bit. Whenever people tell me they're excellent negotiators, I'm always a bit worried, because we might not agree on what it is exactly to be an excellent negotiator. And I think, we're talking about people. Typically, it means that they want to win. They want to mop the floor with the other person. Yeah. The other person can't have anything. It's a little bit like never split the difference, right? I want it all.
Absolutely.
I want everything to myself. You can get nothing. And I think there are situations where it's applicable, like when you're negotiating a hostage, for example, with a hostage taker, because, you're not going to split, the people, the hostages, right? Like you have to get them all free. But most people in their daily lives, they're negotiating with people with whom they will have a continued relationship.
Absolutely.
So you can't just screw them over because you're going to work with them tomorrow. And so that's really something that I see. I think a lot of companies, I see that a lot with my students, they're going to pressure them to accept a very low salary. And maybe the student is going to accept it because they're just very worried. They don't know how to answer. They don't know what to say. But it doesn't mean it's a one negotiation, because if the person quits 6 months from now because they're very upset, what did you win exactly? So why do you think, we function this way? Like, what makes us function that way?
Yeah, you are so right in everything you say, Jean. And the example of employment, it's terrible. How they want to squeeze, how they hired. They might even hire the wrong people because either you hire someone with low self-esteem, and that is not going to give 100%, or you hire someone which is talented but is going to look for other options. So it's definitely, politics work on very short-term decisions too. And I don't know much about the US and the rest of the world, but in Switzerland it's amazing. They really make that negotiation based on the next 6 months to 2 years, and with a very detrimental long-term. The why, it's very difficult. You should maybe address people or ask that question to people that study sociology. The only thing I know is on my little world, it's that every time I bring subjects of emotions or emotional intelligence, I'm kind of laughed at. Yesterday we were at the European Union and talking with a few. There was a minister and there was a few people, and you talk about emotion. They really look at you and you say, kiddo, here it's the big boys.
Yeah, it's not serious, right?
Exactly. Business is business.
Their whole work is about emotions. Like, all of their do is about emotions.
But they don't know, and they don't see, and they don't want that, because the word emotions or emotional intelligence brings something that is intensely weak for them. Yeah. It's amazing. They feel vulnerable. And it's like, no, business is business. And it's crazy because if you look, we were talking about Ukraine and we're talking about other things, and you look at how emotions impact most of everybody at every level. I remember I worked with a few ministers and even with a few presidents of countries. And I remember I was very surprised because when you close the door, especially in conflict resolution situation, when you close the door and you're alone with them, a few of them cried. Because it was difficult. because being insulted in the press every day, because having your wife called names, because, they are humans and everybody's humans. Yeah, they tend to be a little more narcissistic because of protection or because of, the profile that actually brought them there. There's a little bit of a sociopathy, there's a little bit of other things, but it doesn't mean that they're all wrong, and that doesn't mean that they're all born that way. You kind of build yourself into something. So every time I bring that subject about emotions, they are really closing the door and say, well, it doesn't work like this if you don't understand. In our world, well, I spoke with a lady from the European Commission or European Union yesterday, and we talked about peace, for example. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, came to Switzerland, and they organizing a big peace conference in Geneva, but Russia is not invited.
Right.
So I kind of brought the subjects. How do you want to talk about peace if the other side is not there?
Yeah.
And she told me the only way to do peace with Russia is to give more weapons to Ukraine. And it is so fundamentally to the opposite of everything I believe that I smiled and I say, I'm very happy to disagree with you, and if one day we can have the chance to have the conversation. And then I said that I really like your jacket and everything, and I move away because there's nothing. I was not there for that. But people understanding that the conflict or that Hamas is talking when they attack, and I don't say that what they did is great.
Right.
To the contrary. But they were talking, they were expressing 16 years of occupation. And then I work with, we have a great collaboration with Israel and with a few companies in Israel. And you see how the people are reacting and the anger and the trauma and the everything. And everybody's communicating and everybody's very emotional. But because you're emotional and Hamas killed 1,200 civilians or military and civilians, but people that of course shouldn't have been killed, doesn't give the right to kill children and say they should all die because they're all terrorists. This is emotional reaction. This is anger. This is a trauma, and your trauma is talking. Your brain is giving information. But if you don't realize that you have all of this, if you don't realize, I'm pretty sure, Jean, you had just in your personal life. I have all the time people telling me, "No, but I'm not emotional. I'm not angry."
But you sound emotional.
And this is our responsibility to bring the back to a little bit of that emotional intelligence. I work now with the European Women Association, and with my wife Sonia, we just created a program for women to develop their innate power, not empowerment, but to really take their place. Because MIT and Union College came out with a study a few weeks ago, that it is now proven scientifically from them that women are more emotionally intelligent in at least two categories, cooperation and collaboration. And it's always funny because when I say to women that they're more emotionally intelligent than men, they look at me and say, "Do you think we didn't know?"
Yeah, they were aware of it.
Exactly. Like, we know. It's just you guys don't see
just
it.
put them in charge. Let's get over that with this. It's stop the wars. Just have women in charge and we'll be done.
Absolutely. So I'm really not a feminist or anything. I try to create bridge between all those genders and everything. But I still a believer that we all have a psychological and emotional profile, and that it should be analyzed, or it should be, at least the person should know what kind of category it is. And I'll give after a very nice example about myself, and because we are very different, all of us, but just not all. We're all different. No. Some people are really on one spectrum, on the other spectrum with, some specific capacities or specific academic capacities, or I have a lot of hyperactivity and deficit of attention. So I know that it's difficult for me to read, and people say, "No, this is wrong. It doesn't exist." But for people that have autism or for people that have something, they know that it's there. I cannot read a book for 6 hours in a row, maybe not even for 2 hours. And I'll give one example. I'm hypersensitive, so I literally have more connection in my right brain. So that hyper empathy makes me very vulnerable to a few things. So I used to be a mediator. I stopped being a mediator for one reason. When I enter in Switzerland, mediation, it's 3 times 1 hour, and then it's legally binding, and it goes to the judge. Three times 1 hour in difficult situation is not enough.
Short. It's really short.
So you sit down there, And let's say there's a toxic relationship,
Yeah.
let's say the husband is very narcissistic pervert, which doesn't really exist. It's a narcissistic manipulator. And the
Right.
poor lady, it's completely submissive. And it can be
Yeah.
the other way around. And so you see during the process that the man is over manipulative and seducing the mediator in bringing and apologizing and everything. And you see that the poor lady is so afraid that she's submitting, she's not saying anything, and she's actually agreeing.
Because she
And it goes,
understands, right? She understands what's going on. She knows
and
the guy is like a smooth talker, and
but
yeah,
she's afraid to speak up.
yeah, but
So
you feel
then
it.
exactly. But the mediator, some of the mediator I work, they say, but it's not our problem. That's their dynamic. So they would actually fail and say, yeah, the husband apologized. He's willing to try again. The woman is accepted. She's not going to charge press charges because of domestic violence and everything. It goes to the judge and bam, the back square one. And
Yeah.
it's terrible. And I cannot stay silent. I see that manipulation, I see these lies, I see everything. I have to speak up. So that's the reason why I've decided not to be a mediator, because I would not be good. I cannot be neutral. I have a lot of talents, and I have a lot of I can be grumpy, I can be, when there's injustice, I can be angry, or I can be willing to save too much or do too much. And that's the other side of being hypersensitive. There's not only positive, but like when I talk to this, I work with a few PhD in biochemistry and these things, and they're like, well, it's beautiful to have that kind of brain, but they say, I don't understand anything. I don't understand the dynamic between my kids. Sometimes I miss events because I didn't realize it was important for them. And so, we all have these different psychological profiles or psychiatrical profiles. We all have our emotional story, so profile and story and traumas. And the thing is, every time we say, I worked a lot with sports people, Jean, you know that. I trained Formula One drivers and other people.
Right.
I did that mental preparation program. And I worked with amazing doctors for many years. And the thing is, you never train them how to drive a car.
No.
It's not the aptitude. You train them on everything around. And it's exactly the same for us. Roger Federer was flying and traveling all the time with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and he's one of the best tennis players. Going to see a shrink, it is actually authenticity. It's actually taking ownership of yourself. People say, oh, I know I'm not perfect, but it's far from the truth. It's not that we're not perfect. It's actually, well, our generation, or the last 100 years, we've destroyed the earth and humanity. So it's not that we're not perfect. It's actually, we might be part of the problem. Our mental, our human ego, the way we've evolved, the way we function with this, not cooperation, but, this win-win. The logo of our foundation, it's W3, it's the win-win-win. And for one reason, because if you win and I win, Gene, and half of the world is dying, the taste is different. It's
Yeah.
like, come on, it's good if you win, we win, but then there's not these kids dying, and we're not destroying the world, and we're not have to lay off 10,000 employees, and how can we work from there to there, which is maybe extreme communism to extreme capitalism? Come on, we're very clever. There's a lot of clever people. We can reinvent a new way. And so that's very important for me. I see how it works in companies when we do profiling of the people, and how actually we match people together. They say, like, but that guy is too different. I cannot work with him. And it's precisely because what he has as a strength, you have as a weakness or a lower point. So you're going to complement each other. And we did that in the company in Israel. We do that in the few companies where we have invested now, and it's amazing how it works. The people, they actually like each other and say, that guy is really good. Every time, he's putting in words what I have in my mind, but I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because suddenly they start to be more cooperative and collaborative, the same intelligence that the women have. And it makes a huge difference. So yeah, I'm a huge believer in doing profiling, but positive profiling, and not only about the rational stuff, about the emotional stuff, the attitude as well. That's very important.
So first of all, it's extremely refreshing, that you're a man and you're advocating to being in touch with your emotions. because I feel like society today, tells us that
Yes.
men are not supposed to have emotions. I was watching a video where there was like just a guy who was like crying for something, and then the comments were like, wow, like who wants to see a 40-year-old cry? And you're like
Yeah.
thinking, but people cry. Like I cry
Yeah.
sometimes, if I
Yeah.
watch a movie or something, it's completely normal. So I have a question for you. And I think it's connected to a comment that we just received on LinkedIn from Zorika. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. But not every conflict is
No.
mediatable. I don't know if it's the right word. But especially sometimes, stopping the relationship is the right
Yeah.
thing to do. How do you
Yes.
decide when, it's the right, like the best thing to do is to walk away?
Thank you, Zorika, for the question. There's not only one answer, but mainly I would say when respect is no longer served and it starts to be autodestruction on one part,
Right.
or when there's so much toxicity that something has that is not that could be avoidable, like this couple that I said before, that they go back together. There's something that has to be done, and then when you see that. Let's just work on one word.
Right.
Mediation, you're supposed to be neutral. In conflict resolution, it might be a little bit different. Not all conflict are mediatable, but everything should be, in conflict resolution, should be accepted. Because when you're in a conflict resolution and you have to negotiate, I'm not doing hostage negotiation, but I work very closely with the group of hostage negotiation team for the ICRC, and I do most of the strategy or the diplomatic relationship, but not really the underground, or I've never worked with the police forces. But I talk to what they call terrorists. So, I worked in Iraq, I work in Kurdistan, I helped a few governments protecting the borders and do other things. And you literally talk to people that are considered terrorists. And there's two aspects. First is, in a lot of cases, if I would be born in the same situation with the same restriction, with the same education, with the same everything, I would most likely be kind of the same type of people. Maybe not killing, but that's a different thing. So that's the understanding number one, empathy, empathos. And the second one is, that you're dealing, because there's a conflict, with most of the parameters that people would not understand and not be capable to handle. So it's not that it's mediatable. Let's take that example of that lady yesterday at the European Union. Well, peace, there's only one way for peace between Ukraine and Russia. It's to give more weapons to Ukraine. I mean, you know that, Jean, because you love conflict management. Just the structure of that sentence, it's a killer for everything.
No.
So it's not mediatable, but every conflict should be, we should include both parties, even the enemy, even the negative party, which if that's judgment, who is really responsible in a conflict, it's very difficult for us to judge because they're dynamic, there's plenty of things you don't know. So I say that every conflict should always have the door open for all parties to be included. And we should, even by changing the people, even by changing the dynamic, but never stop open discussion in terms of war or in terms of conflict. And I've proposed that to the World Economic Forum. I've proposed that to other stakeholders, saying, be a neutral place where people can come and talk. And I'm going to say something, maybe people are going to blame me for that, but actually both Russia and Ukraine at the beginning wanted to have this discussion. They tried. And it was actually stopped by other powers than Russia and Ukraine to stop these discussions. I'm not going to say who, that's highly political, and I'm
Right.
surely not political at all, but it was not their choice to continue the war. It was complete other interests. The Kremlin, for 3 months, they had the signed agreement of discussions and everything they had published on the page of the Kremlin. You would go on the Kremlin, you would see this. For 3 months, the first 3 months of the war. So they had the will of doing something better than what they had to do. And I'm not blaming who is responsible. And so I'll give you another example, Jim, which is really important. And I'm going to give my regards to him because he's a man I respect very much. I collaborated a little bit with Jérôme Bellion. Jérôme Bellion in Geneva was the head of the multilateral diplomacy for the European Union for many years. He was the one talking with Hamas, he was the one talking with the Taliban. And I remember a wonderful story that he explained, that he was the one for the European Union in charge of discussing with the Taliban. So he could only meet them, I think it was in Peshawar, in Pakistan, in the embassy of a country. And so he could not even offer a tea or anything because it would be finance terrorism. So, he had to play a little bit with some rules. The actual president of the Taliban, which was his main contact, the only thing he was asking all the time, Jérôme, was inclusion. And because it's a terrorist group, it was a terrorist group, now it's a terrorist state, having the government, nobody wanted it. But how do you expect things to get better? Or what do you expect if you don't include them? Suddenly America leaves the country, they get in power, nobody has any, what do you expect? Don't you think that you're radicalizing them even more? You're not even giving them a chance to get something. Know your enemy. You know that it's old Chinese war philosophy. Know your enemy. It's very important. So we do the same with most of the things. Now we do this peace conference in Geneva and we're not involving Russia. But how can you have peace if you don't have the other party? And this, all of this for us is completely wrong. So when I worked in the Maldives in 2018, I helped the son of the former president to handle the state of emergency. And I remember a lot of these discussions we had with them. So, most of the people that didn't want to be at the table in the whole party talks, just imagine, Jean, if you always open the door and you always can't, and you say, there's 14 seats around the table, your 2 seats, there's 12 people coming, but your 2 seats are always empty. The day you want to come, you can come. And you start the meeting without them. What is happening after 2 months when everybody's starting discussing and they're talking, the 2 seats are empty? By their own choice, they come because they don't want to be radicalized or put aside. So these are peace strategies to say, well, you're not your enemy. Of course, we need to negotiate very important stakes and there's people dying. But we're not going to have peace if we don't include the other sides. And for me, this is all, we can talk about this for hours because most of the classes, and I give now, I'm a professor in a university in Ukraine, I give classes in Ukraine, I go there and I try to help, the small drop of the ocean that I can bring, but I bring it. If we don't bring subjects of attitude and emotional intelligence, and how do we address conflict, and how do we swallow our own ego and say, look, I understand the guy is angry, he's spitting at me, but I still need to stay there because we're in conflict resolution. So to come back to the question, no, not all conflicts are mediatable, but all conflicts should be handled with never leaving the table more than a few minutes, saying, look, for the moment it's touching some of my red buttons. I've reached my limit for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning. And if you have to change, you change. And if you have to go to someone and cry or express anger or whatever and rework your strategy, you go back. But if you stop discussing, you lose completely the hand on everything that will happen in the future because you don't even get the information.
That's extremely interesting. And I think it applies not just to, 2 countries being in conflict. I think it really applies to just 2 people.
Yes.
Yeah?
Sorry, Jean. I just want to mention, we wrote a book with my wife called True to Self, which is kind of a holistic methodology to bring you back to yourself first. And that's what I've learned with the doctors, with the Formula One drivers. And she wrote a sentence that comes from a book that was written in the US in the 1970s, I think, called Course in Miracle. And it's, do you choose to be right or do you choose to be happy? Yeah. And every time I face a situation, I ask that question first. And I realize that my ego, my mental wants to be right. Honestly, most of the time, I don't want to be right. I just want to win the argument.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to let him win. And then 5 minutes pass or 20 minutes pass or 2 days pass. And I'm like, honestly, that was not that bad. The person didn't insult me that much. And so that's the first question. The second question is, what would love do now? And I asked that to a few of the bad people I've been working with or I've been negotiating with. I remember I had it was the village head in Iraq. And I was speaking with him and he could hurt people at that very moment. And I just brought the question and I said, look, I'm just going to give you that sentence. What would love do now? What would you tell the person you love the most, that little 4 years old daughter he had, if you would tell her now what you're about to do? And I repeated, what would love do now? And the guy was very touched and he was very destabilized, and he didn't do the bad thing that he could have done with these people. So, we're not changing the world, or we're not saving the world. But once, and you're right, at every level, you're fighting with someone at the office, you're fighting with your spouse, you're fighting with whatever. It's just, do I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? She's the woman I love. Do I really want to be right and put the shit out of her face and say, come on, you're so stupid?
You know, yeah. But I think, it's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of what I teach students about the different types of conflicts, right? Where you start with something about the task. So you start about, I don't know, we disagree about the task at play, but then it's going to turn into something personal. And, a lot of times it's like an escalation that goes, for example, somebody says, I think your idea is stupid. And I'm going to take it as, he just said I was stupid, right? But he didn't say I was stupid. He said my idea was stupid. But for me, that's how it registers. So so you said something that it also reminds me now. A comedian I really, really loved, who died a few years ago, is Joan Rivers, and she was talking at the end of her life about kind of like having conflicts with people and how to deal with it. And then she was saying that she developed the habit of asking herself if 6 months from now she would still care about this conversation. Like if she still cares about it 6 months from now,
absolutely,
then it's worth it. But if it's kind of like just something that somebody said and you wouldn't care in 6 months, then don't even go for the fight,
Yeah. I love what you say, and there's actually something. What is this great, amazing, big FBI negotiator that you have in the US, the most famous
Chris
now?
Voss?
One? Oh, sorry, Chris Voss.
Yeah.
So Chris Voss, in his classes, he talks about accusation audit.
Yeah.
Accusation audit is something I really like because you can prepare the relationship. So let's say I have something called peace treaty. So if we have to collaborate, Jean, I'm going to have you read the peace treaty, which is 8 points of how we're going to handle conflict. This is finished. You and me are never going to have a conflict. It's there. And the accusation audit, it's really to say, hey, Jean, there's something I want to tell you about, your hair and everything. Would you allow me to say it? And then your subconscious mind is lowering all the barriers. And if you're like, no, everybody's talking about my hair, I don't want. Or you say, yeah, just go on, Steve. And you're not gonna take it personal. I was quite always against the sentence from Harvard saying you have to differentiate the people from the problem, which is true and not true at the same time. And you understand, because you're not negotiating only something, you're negotiating with someone. So the content and the form, the way I'm going to tell you things, it's almost more important of what I'm going to tell you, because if I make that wrong, it's terrible. So sometimes I tell people, I always joke about it. So I speak a lot. That's one of my my brain function, that when I talk, the ideas are coming. And my wife is different. She writes a lot. So I always start a conference by saying, oh, my wife would tell you, never ask Steve a question if you don't have 30 minutes for an answer. And I joke about it. So I prepare people, because I know it can be annoying. And I know that someone can say, Steve, sorry, can I speak? And I'm not going to take it personally. At least they know it. So I prepare them. That's this accusation audit from Chris Voss. And it's a fantastic thing, because the more I tell you something that you might actually think about me, which might be projection, but still, the less you're going to take is as a threat. And by preparing conflict, I give that little peace treaty. That's the only contract we have signed with my wife. And we work together, we co-invested in companies at that peace treaty. She knows exactly, if there's a conflict between us, how she has the right to talk to me, and how I need to shut up and listen, empathetic listening, and it's 8 points. And it's very, very clear. But when there's something happening, she has 24 hours to speak, or 48 hours to write me something, or 76 hours to talk to the mediator we have and say, look, there was really something and she's really touched. So at least she has the whole freedom. And when she tells me, point number 2, I don't have the right to speak. I don't justify or I don't say anything. I receive her. And when you just prepare this negotiation, when you prepare everything, my God, it becomes amazingly easy to communicate because we're not afraid of conflict. You're not afraid of me telling you, oh, your idea is stupid. And you just say, Steve, you just said the word stupid. It hurt me a little bit. And I would say, oh, I'm sorry, Jean, I didn't realize, can we just talk about it? Or I'm sorry, it's not you, it's just the idea. And that's very important.
So we have a question from Tina, who's a friend of the show. And so Tina says, are there steps to building psychological safety in the negotiation process? So she says, I think honesty, heart, empathy in the process, fairness are what I'm hearing today. And she says, thank you. So how would you, and I think you've been answering this a little bit, but like, how would you create psychological safety with the other person?
Oh, Tina, thank you very much for your question. The first thing is to create psychological safety with yourself. If everything that the other side is going to do is going to trigger something inside of you, then you need to prepare it with professionals, with psychologists. It doesn't mean you have a problem. It might be like me, that you're hypersensitive. So that's the number one. And don't underestimate this. If someone is spitting at you and you don't move and you stay kind and you stay aligned with yourself, this is the biggest strength you can have because most of the people, they don't have that. And the second part is actually understanding the other side. So I'll give you a little story, Tina. I used to work a little bit in Hong Kong, and I was lucky enough to work with a few actors there. One was Jackie Chan and his surroundings and all. But it was not in this case, it was someone next to him. And that was something very conflictual. So I had to represent a party, but I was alone, against one of the most aggressive law firm of Hong Kong. And these guys, they're really skilled, they're really good, and they really don't have empathy and everything. So the thing I did, and it was very, very difficult. It was one of the most difficult moments for me to do it. I actually got information about them, their case, their everything. And then I got someone to introduce me a junior partner in the firm. It's the son of a friend of mine who has a financial company there. And then through her, I got the information. I bought chocolates and presents for the kids. And I say to that person, oh, I'm in Hong Kong 2 weeks before the meeting, the bad meeting. I say, oh, I'm going to Hong Kong this weekend. Would you mind if I just come Saturday morning? They work in Hong Kong Saturday morning to the law firm and meet with you guys. I have a little present. And she said yes. So she came here. She introduced me all the partners and I had chocolates and a little something, a little furry dog that we have in Switzerland for the kids. How did they treat me 2 weeks after when I came? I was not the enemy anymore. It was really tricky. They could have said, this guy is a moron, we don't mind about the little dogs, but I touched something out of them that I was not the bad negotiator. I was not one of the killer lawyers that they used to face. I became human. And knowing your counterpart is key. Most of the people, they show us the first 2 minutes, sometimes the worst parts, but they're good people. When I work in Kurdistan, in Iraq, what would they do the first 2 days when I would enter their villages? They would show me their big guns. They would show me how strong they are. And I would be fascinated. I would ask questions and I would eat with them and everything. And after 2 days of showing me that they could kill me and that they were actually the best in the world, then, they were bored. And they was like, so who are you? Yeah. And then finally, I had time to open up and I had time to talk and I listened and participate to their world with genuine interest, not manipulation, genuine interest. I receive them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think as much as we want to think that we're completely just business or completely emotionless, at the end of the day, if you like somebody, it's going to impact, how you work with them. If you dislike them, it's also going to impact it. We're highly emotional.
Yes. And men too, Jean.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you said, I had a bad phone call this morning from my dog and there's a possibility he's never going to walk again because he was paralyzed a few years ago and he touched that thing. I cried at the office.
Of course.
And I was all happy to cry. I love that little guy. He's been here for 16 years. What do you think? If I don't cry or what does that make me? It's beautiful everything, and sad everything. And you see a kid being killed in Israel or in Palestine, you cry because it's sad. It's a kid, and so it's don't cry for everything, but just authenticity. It's a part of accepting that we have flow of emotions, we have flow of mood, we have flow of everything. Like when you throw a tennis ball in the air, you're not surprised when it goes down. So with our mood, it's exactly the same. It should be actually a flow. If you're good every day, well, you're very lucky, or you might be sometimes a little bit in a maniac state. And they are little warnings.
All right. So I think we're at a point in the show where we're going to comment on a few LinkedIn posts that have been posted, and we're going to play the Master Negotiators game. So let me try to do this. Okay. So I'm allowing this. Can you see? Yeah, I think you can see it. All right. So let me just read it really quickly so you guys can see kind of like what we're talking about. Have you seen this video, Steve? Do you
No,
know?
no, no, not at
Do you
all.
know what
No,
this is? So it's
no.
actually, so our friend John Diffenbar. I don't know if you know him. He's a managing director at EY. He's a negotiation expert, and he posted a really interesting post about this video, which happened where basically there is this guy. His name is Kavanaugh. And he was playing piano in public, and there was kind of like some sort of a conflict because he was streaming live, this like piano performance in a shopping mall, and at the same time there were Chinese people in the back who were very upset that they were being filmed, and so they reached out to him, and basically things got heated. They got into this huge argument, like, they were like screaming and all that stuff to basically say like, you need to delete this video, right? But which is kind of like not possible because it was being streamed
It
live.
was live, yeah.
Right. But what was really interesting is, I was kind of like looking at the comments. What was really interesting is it's exactly the Streisand effect, which is when you're hoping to silence people and then it ends up
Yeah,
even worse. And so there were like
yeah,
6 million people watched the video.
yeah.
You can see the link here. 6 million people watched the video. The guy is now like a podcast superstar, and it's exactly the opposite of what
Yeah.
these people wanted, because now, like their faces is all over the world. So how do you think, you can approach a situation when you're asking someone to do something maybe they don't want to do? Like stop
Well,
filming.
there's two aspects. The first one is to accept that maybe they have the right to film,
Yeah.
and that what I want is not always what the world is, and in most of the cases, it would actually not be. And the second one would be to try to enter into a more positive and constructive negotiation and or discussion more than negotiation, and just bringing a few points that there's a kid, and the kid cannot be filmed, and for the security, or I don't know, but something that is really not me trying to take control over them, but actually especially these days, and especially Chinese, because everything is filmed there. So it's a little
Right.
but I would approach it from a very kind and very strict, saying, look, just filming us here. We understand you filmed, but we want you to stop because of that security reason, whatever. And if they don't want, then you just have to accept, because there's
Right.
nothing you sometimes, and like you cannot mediate a few things. Sometimes there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, so they called the police actually, which is kind of like the escalation, right?
Yeah.
But I really agree with you. I think sometimes there is nothing you can do, but I think probably the only way to make it happen is to not make it seem like it's a demand, like I'm telling you
Yeah.
what to do, because people don't want to be told what to do.
There's one thing, Gene, that I would recommend everybody to. It seems a little sometimes simple, but to watch all videos from Marshall Rosenberg on how do you say in English? Communication non violente, in non-violent
Nonviolent
communication.
communication. Yeah, if
Exactly.
you
And
send me the link, I'll put it on a
yeah,
newsletter. I'll
and
add it to
but
my newsletter.
yes,
Very
I'll do that. But he's very famous in the U.S. He died now, and Marshall Rosenberg, and he's playing the coyote and the giraffe and everything. And there's really interesting ways in non-violent communication to approach people, and how you play with it, and how you don't take it personal, and how you stay, and how you compliment, and how you express the feelings, and how you recognize the feelings of others. I know that every time there's a conflict or a fight in the street, my wife is, oh God, he's going again. But most of the time, I can stop it. Most
Yeah.
of the time, and I don't put myself in the middle. I remember there was a big fight in Costa Rica. I went and I took tissues. And every time I say, stop, you're bleeding. And I was giving him a tissue. And then I would stop the other one. It cuts their emotional fight. You're
Yeah.
so much in it. It takes them out. And then, oh, stop, you're bleeding. I was not saying the other one is bleeding, but I was giving them tissues and suddenly they stopped. And I said, look, come on, guys, now you look really, just fight later. Just take a moment to heal. And they just went
Just
off.
went away. Very good. Okay, so the second post I wanted to show is this one. It's from Ugo Merlone, who's a psychology professor
That's
in
a good
Italy.
movie.
Do you know Ugo? He's great. He's going to be a guest, and the reason I wanted to do this is because he reached out about this post that he created, asking people like, "Hey, do you have negotiation movies? Like, movies where you have like really cool negotiations." And so it's a really great resource. I'll send it on my newsletter, but you can find a bunch of different movies, that have been added here. I added, by the way, the Erin Brockovich. So somebody was saying, "Oh, the Erin Brockovich," which I say is true. It's a great movie for negotiation. But something that I remembered is that the lawyer Tom Girardi actually is disgraced now and is going through he stole $15 million from his clients. So
Oh no, oh no.
yeah, even if
That's a
it's
bad
if it's
story.
like a
Bad
nice
end.
movie,
Bad end.
yeah, bad end. But so actually really cool post where people are adding like a lot of different movies. I have to say one of the main sources that I use in my classes is I love the TV show Shark Tank, or in Canada it's called Dragon's Den, where people are pitching to investors their company, because then a lot of times they're negotiating kind of like an investment, so you can see that. But do you have a movie to recommend, Steve? You have something that comes to mind about a great movie for negotiation?
Well, I have a few ones in French, but that's not going to help the audience. No, and actually, The Negotiator is one of my favorite. I love how Samuel Jackson is playing it.
Yeah.
No, I don't have anything that comes in mind. Maybe what I really like is that in Good Will Hunting,
Yeah, it's a great movie.
the moment where he's on the bench and he
Yeah.
talks to him, and then he brings everything with authenticity and with kindness, and he just say, I just realized that you don't know all of this, and then now I can finally sleep. And the way he touches him, when the guy is completely, Matt Damon is completely locked down in his own pain, it's beautiful. So it's not really negotiation, but in conflict negotiation, that's the kind of things you would use. So I'm
Yeah.
just going to say that because I absolutely adore that movie.
Very good. So something I wanted to talk about, because I agreed that I would talk about it, and it's a great initiative. It's called the Warsaw Negotiation Round. It's a negotiation tournament. I know they had it last year. I'm not sure if they had it before that. But if you're a student and you're interested in learning more about negotiation, it's the 15th edition of the most prestigious international. Yeah, it's a really cool negotiation competition. It's from the 19th to the 21st April 2024. If you're a student and you want to participate in a negotiation competition, Warsaw Negotiation Round, you can find them on LinkedIn. It's also a plug, but I'm actually going to be hosting the McGill des Hôtels negotiation competition. It's our second edition. We will be hosting it from March 1 to March 2 at McGill University in Montreal. We're limiting it to 16 teams, and it's for MBA students or graduate MBA students or graduate management students. So if you want to join, reach out to me, and you can look on my profile. We have just all the information that is part of this. Okay, and so the last thing, I wanted to play this game with you, Steve, which is kind of like this educational resource I created on, to create kind of like discussions about negotiation. And so it's a card game where I pick a card from 3 stacks. You have one stack that's the negotiation type, and so it gives you kind of like what you have to negotiate. The second stack is the relationship, so it gives you information about your relationship with the other person, so some piece of information you have about the other person. And the third time is the setting, which is when and where the negotiation will take place. And so if you combine the 3
Sure.
cards, it gives you kind of like a situation, and then The goal is to find a negotiation approach for this. And so these are the cards that I had picked this week. And so the negotiation type is reject a promotion request from an underperforming subordinate.
Right.
The relationship is the other party often reacts emotionally, and this is a
Right.
scheduled phone call. So maybe let's start with just the first part, which is really hard, right? It's to give basically bad news to somebody.
Yeah.
They want to do something, and you're telling them no. How do you reject? What would be your approach to reject a request, a promotion request coming from somebody who's not performing well?
Right. So there's three aspects. If you want someone to understand something emotionally, it has to be emotional, credible, and verifiable. So I would be emotionally very kind, but I would be very credible in what I say. So
Right.
I would prepare and back it up with, some of your objectives were not reached, or the very rational things, and then it has to be credible. I want him to validate, and I want him actually to fix objective for the next time, saying, if you want that today, no, because of this. So very kindly, no, because of this, in the past you didn't achieve this, and then create a solution for the future. That's the ethical part of you not only sidelining someone, you're actually asking him to open the discussion on how can we reach that together. And you create a collaboration by saying, I understand you didn't reach that because of that reason, it's for us. We tell you our reason. You have the right to explain us why you didn't reach your objective or the milestones. And then you really create something. That's how I would approach it. But in a very kindly, the form has to be very, very respectful. And I would, in that case, play a few accusation audits just to make sure that, she knows, or that person know, just before I bring the bad news.
And so, how do you react? Say the person starts crying, which does happen. Some people get really overwhelmed and they start crying.
Oh, I absolutely understand that in your situation it can be emotionally draining. And don't worry, we're here. We have time. Cry as much as you want. I'm going to receive everything you have to say, and we'll build the future together.
Yeah, I think one of the issues, right, when you reject a promotion, but I mean, I don't have anybody that requests promotions from me, but I do grade students, and a lot of times, sometimes they receive a low grade, and something that I've realized, I tell this story a lot because a lot of negotiation professors write in their syllabus, they have a sentence that says something like, although I'm a negotiation professor, you can negotiate everything in this class except for the grades. And I
Yeah.
used to add this to my syllabus, but then a student told me, like, why can't we negotiate grades? And then I thought, it's true, why not? And so I started negotiating with students. I mean, basically, just managing the conflict. If they believe the grade is unfair, we'll have a discussion about it. But I think one of the tricky parts when you say no to someone is, or you give them negative news, is that a lot of times to protect their ego, they're going to try to find another reason. So they don't want to
Yeah.
be like, it's going to be your fault. Like, the professor is unfair.
Yeah.
They have favorites, I'm not
Yeah.
a favorite, that kind of stuff. And so I realized that by actually organizing a meeting with the person and really going over the essay, I can convince them that they have the grade they deserve. And it's a way to manage the conflict. But what would be a trick for you to prepare yourself mentally if you're about to have a meeting with somebody who's cried before, for example?
Right. I would accept first. I would prepare myself and accept it. I would recognize the person as very emotional. I might prepare the person or not, but or starting the look. The if you don't want to create a little trauma, it's not what the person is going through. It's the non-expression of the emotion attached to what happened. So when someone is emotional and cries, then let the person cry.
Right.
And you can actually even say that in this room, everything is discussed very openly, and that sometimes we have good news, sometimes we have bad news. The bad news are taken fully. We are receiving the bad news, and then we help the person build something else. Now, if the anger is a little too hard, I would say, look, I would give you a few questions or a few tasks, and then tomorrow morning we sit down together and we start progressing into the future. You don't address all the rational point now, because you know that when you're emotional, you're
Yeah.
rational going low. And so they're not really respective in rational things. And if someone is trying to blame the other one, you say, absolutely wonderful, I'm ready to receive. And then you just write down everything and you say, look, in your objective for the future, you bring it back to something credible and verifiable, for the objective in the future, and to make sure that you're going to make it in the next assignment in 6 months or 2 years, that we are going to compensate all of this. And we're going to find the right partners in this firm to actually work with you. And it's okay for someone to cry. It's not, you're not going to say yes to someone just to please that person.
Oh yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just want,
Go for it. Yeah.
I just want to give you a little story. Is that when my mother had a heart attack, and she was in the coma for 4 days.
Wow.
And I had the second day, we knew that the brain wouldn't restart. So my brother was like, oh, I'm incapable of speaking to all her friends. So he says, can you call all of them? So she was not dead, but we knew, sadly, that she would not recover. So I just work on a piece of paper and saying, what is a trauma? How can I not create a trauma with these people? So I called them first with a smile, on the radio,
Right.
they call you to talk with a smile. And then I say, hey, Lise, this is Steve, Fanny's son. How are you? And she would be, Steve, nice to meet you. And then I say, Lise, if I had a bad news to tell you about my mother, how would you like me to say it to you?
Yeah.
She decided. They went through their mental, subconscious mind. Absolutely. And then most of them told me, was she dead? And I said, no. She had a heart attack. She's in the hospital. I put them up. And then I say, I think it would be really lovely if you come and give her a kiss. And then at the hospital, one person hang up the phone. My mom's best friend say, can you come and see me? And when I arrived there, she took me in the arm and said, she's dead. And I said, no. And then it didn't create any, they thanked me after that, because the worst is having the surprise of something.
Yeah.
So before saying you don't get the promotion, play a little bit with I'm going to mention that accusation audits. Thank you, Chris Voss. Again, prepare the person. Just say, look, and don't talk about yourself, talk about them. But, in a career, there's a lot of, building, and we create, and sometimes we reach our job objective, something not. Then, this year, what the information we have is that, you haven't reached the objective. So we're really trying to consider everything, how we can work. So for the promotion, for the moment, we believe that it cannot be achievable because of this. So we have decided and you move to something else. And then emotional, credible, and verifiable. And the people, they feel, if you're really authentic, to answer Mike's question, if you're really authentic about this kind of things, they feel it. If you're genuinely happy for them that, they can work on something for the next 2 years, and that can make a difference.
That's extremely interesting. And so I think it takes us maybe to one last topic that I'd like to discuss with you. And it's the topic, it's related to emotions, but it's about mental health. I feel like in today's society, we talk a lot about mental health. And I think a lot of managers say, I care a great deal about people's mental health. But then when people are in an actual mental health crisis, then we don't know how to deal with it. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to know, I deal with hundreds of students a year, and there is just like a percentage of students who have mental health issues. There is nothing you can do about it. It's like 5% or something. How do you deal with somebody who's really struggling mentally, like who's having a crisis?
Well, it depends what kind of crisis.
Right.
But, if it's really mental health, and if it's really psychopathologies or pathologies, something psychiatric, then you need to address it in a very strict way. Otherwise, there's a lot of way, and this non-violent communication is learning a lot on how to turn out attacks, for example.
Yeah.
So I gave you one example, but most of the people, when they're dysfunctional, they will attack, right? They will react. It's never go into the game. It's actually to neutralize it and come with something kind. Like I told you, if I insult you and say, oh, you really look shit with your hair, and you just say, Steve, it's sad that you think this, because I really think that, your Italian look, it's brilliant, and your little glasses, and, you're shining, Steve. You're wonderful. You're a little bit of an example for me. If you give me 3 compliments like this, it's very difficult for me to attack you. It's very difficult for my ego to come and, it neutralizes something. So there's the, there's a lot of people narcissistic. So there's a little bit of
Yeah.
manipulation trick that I'm going to give to women. When you're approached by someone who's very manipulative and narcissistic, the
Narcissistic. Yeah.
narcissistic, his biggest fear is to be discovered, right?
Right.
So actually, you can lie. My wife is teaching that to a few women that were abused in their life, and they're still attracting sometimes. They're still prey. And it's just to say, hey, look, sweetheart, my father is a psychiatrist. I know exactly how your type of guy is functioning. And immediately the guy goes. It's amazing. They're so afraid to be discovered
Yeah.
that the subconscious messages say it's risky and they go away. So there's plenty of way of handling the complex profiles. And the only thing is, well, with mental health and with psychopathologies, is there's a lot of non-negotiable. That's where some of the people you cannot mediate or you cannot handle, and that's when sometimes you need a little bit of an institutional power to neutralize them and just to make them understand that what they do is completely unacceptable. And we have plenty of powers. Sometimes you have your personal power, which can go into the relationship, situational, and then institutional. But if you lose it, there's a lot of institutional power you can call, just maybe being a team, or maybe someone older, or maybe a team, or maybe police, or maybe the dean, or the whatever in the college. And there's plenty of things you can create. And the thing is, that one of the strength of authenticity, and that's one of the conference I give. I will give you just the subjects of the conference that I've chosen for this year. It's the power of questioning. Because I never ask a question to have an answer. I ask you the actual questions to understand what kind of other questions I have to ask.
Right.
The answer in just a little part of the entire thing. And a lot of people, they're afraid to ask for help or to say, look, I don't understand, or I've built my model. I study a little bit psychology and psychiatry, but never to become psychologist or psychiatrist. It's actually, I work with very skilled psychologists and psychiatrists, and I just wanted to make sure that if I give them a phone call, I know which question or which information I have to give them or which question I have to ask, just to know that I understand the situation. And that mindset has changed a lot in my mind.
Well, Steve, I mean, we're reaching the end of the show. Where can people reach out to you? Maybe on LinkedIn?
Well, on LinkedIn, yes, Steve Alban Tineo.
Tineo, perfect.
I'm not really huge in social media and everything. I'll be a little more this year. And please write to me, add me, ask me questions. I'm very open with my time, and I always find time for a great discussion. And I give conferences mainly. Sometimes I even give them for free because we do a lot of charity work. So I just want to give you the 6 subjects that I've chosen for this year to see how it's a little bit different. So our methodology is called KYF, Know Yourself First. So the first one is the self. Who are you and why is it important to discover it? The second one is aptitude versus attitude, the impact of emotional intelligence and emotions on your effectiveness and your life. The third one is leadership for women. Learn to negotiate by revealing your innate power. Fourth one is become an expert negotiator by managing emotions, fear, beliefs, and limitations for yourself and for the others. Fifth one is internal conflict versus external conflicts, the power of emotions in negotiation and conflict resolution. 6, finding your way, your path, and your life, and transformative journey where individuals explore the depth of their own aspirations.
So where will that happen?
Oh, I do every week.
But
So
you do
I
it in
send
person or is it online? Or
Yes, I do online, I do person. I have a few, even Jean, if you're interested, I'll do a conference for you show with great pleasure.
Yeah.
You choose one, you invite your guest. I do it for free with great pleasure. It's more participative. It's more because I love that. Sometimes I do in conferences. Sometimes I do, and we have a program in a few universities. I have a collaboration with the Netherlands Business Academy and other universities that they work with. So it depends. It's every week. At least I have 1 or 2 conferences. So sometimes I add people into existing conference. Sometimes I organize for them. Sometimes, for company, they pay for it. Sometimes it's whatever. It's just reach out to me because I'm really I'm more into the sharing than the getting. So, I really do believe that each one teach one.
Yeah.
So if you can teach me something and share something with me, I'm all in as well.
That's amazing. Okay, so I will add your links to my newsletter. Let me just wrap up the show. So thank you, first of all, thank you so much, Steve, for making time for us. I really, really appreciate it. It was really great catching up with you and hearing about, everything you said today about emotions and emotional intelligence. It's extremely important. So please go follow Steve on LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up to the newsletter so that you can have access to the future events. And I think, Steve, I'll take you up on it. I think it would be great to have some sort of a speaker series where, we
Great
can
pleasure.
have people come and, we can all learn, because we're going to have to learn our whole lives. We can't just go to college and then it's over, right? We have to learn our whole
Yeah.
lives. So it's extremely valuable. Thank you so much, Steve. I'll see you in the next
With
one.
great pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you very